And we're live from the living room as Doug eyes up the match day spread. He's reaching for the buffalo wing. Perfect! Hang on, what's this? Oh, he's gone for a can of Pepsi too! Incredible! What a finish! Sensational combination! Look at the delight on his face. There's no doubt about it. It just tastes better. Match days deserve Pepsi. Food deserves Pepsi. Grab a pack of Pepsi Zero Sugar for today's match. It's poetry in motion.
I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either going to be okay.
No, stop.
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
The Popol Vuh. This is the beginning of the ancient stories, the words that preserve the memory of the first people. It is not a tale to be spoken lightly, nor a dream to be set aside at dawn. It is the root and the foundation, the woven cord of memory that binds together the generations of the Quiché, so that what was, what is, and what will be shall not be forgotten. Here's told what took place long before there were mountains, before there were valleys, before the surface of the earth was hardened beneath the feet of men. At that time, the sky was still empty, and the sea spread without end, calm and silent. No sun had yet risen, no moon had yet walked its nightly path. There was no bird to break the stillness of the air, no deer to bound across the hills, no fish swimming in the waters. There was only the vast expanse of the sky above and the endless waters below, mingling in hushed immensity. Yet within that immensity dwelt the makers and the modelers, those who stirred in thought before creation was formed. They were called the Heart of Sky, and within him resided Huracan, whose name means one-legged storm, who flashes in the lightning, who breathes in the hurricane wind, and who speaks in the rolling thunder. With him was Guchumats, the feathered serpent, clothed in radiant plumage, gliding in the mist between water and sky. Together, they were the shapers of what would be, the first dreamers of creation. They communed in silence, speaking in thoughts, not in words. They desired that life should arise, that earth should be given form, that the waters should be divided, that there should be dawn upon the world. They sought companions to praise them, hearts to remember them, mouths to speak their names. And thus they planned the beginning of the earth. Then the word was spoken. By their command, the waters withdrew from the heavens, and the land appeared. At once the earth was formed, spreading broad and firm, covered with mountains and valleys, carved with rivers and springs. The face of the world was clothed in green. Great trees rose from the new soil, their roots grasping the fresh earth, their branches lifting toward the heavens. Grasses and vines spread. Flowers opened their faces to the breath of the wind. The waters gathered into lakes and seas, and in them fish darted and multiplied. The air was filled with the voices of birds, their wings flashing in the morning light. Deer leapt upon the hillsides, and all manner of beasts stirred in the valleys. Thus was the earth adorned, thus the dwelling place was made ready. But the makers were not yet content. For though the trees gave shade, though the birds sang, though the deer ran swift, none of these creatures could speak their names. None could offer them reverence. None could remember the word by which the world had been created. And so they thought, let there be beings with hearts and minds who can honor us and call upon us. Let there be guardians of the earth who will walk upright, who will tell the story of creation, who will keep alive the memory of the dawn. Thus began the fashioning of the first people. The makers shaped men of clay, molding their limbs, forming their mouths, lifting them upon the earth. These figures walked and spoke, but their bodies were soft, their joints weak, their faces crumbled in the rain, their flesh dissolved in the water. They were fragile and fleeting, and soon they fell apart, returning to the mud from which they had been made. Seeing this, the heart of sky declared, "These shall not be, for they are too frail. They cannot endure. Let another attempt be made." Then the makers shaped men of wood. They carved them from the trunks of trees, giving them form, giving them faces, setting them upright to walk the earth. These wooden people multiplied and spread across the land. They spoke words, they bore children, they built houses. Yet their hearts were empty, their souls hollow, for they had no understanding, no memory of the divine. They did not lift their eyes to the sky in reverence, nor did they speak the names of the heart of sky and the feathered serpent. They moved as though alive, but within them there was no spirit. And so the makers looked upon them and judged them unworthy. "They shall not endure," they said, "for they do not remember us, nor do they honor the word of creation. They are empty and without gratitude." Then destruction came upon the wooden people. Their own dogs rose against them, crying, "You gave us no food." Their own grinding stones rebelled, saying, "You wore us out, but gave us no thanks." Even their pots and pans turned upon them, shouting, "We burned with fire, yet you showed us no respect." The earth itself rose in anger, and a great flood came, sweeping away the wooden people. Their faces were broken, their bones splintered, and they were scattered into the forests. There their descendants lingered as monkeys, whose cries echo the hollow speech of those who were unworthy. Thus the monkeys remain as a sign, a living reminder of the first failed creation. Now, the makers pondered again. Twice had they attempted, and twice had their work been found wanting. Yet they did not despair, for the dawn had not yet come. The world still awaited its true people, those who would be able to keep the word, to honor the divine, and to live with hearts that remembered. And so they said, "Let there be another attempt. Let there be a people of substance, whose bodies endure, whose hearts are strong, whose words will lift our names into eternity." This then is the beginning of the memory of the Quiché, the sacred telling of how the earth was formed, of how the first men were shaped, and of how the world awaited the dawn. It is not a tale of shadows, but the truth of our beginning. Here it is preserved. Here it is spoken, so that it may never be lost. Thus the words are gathered, woven like threads into a single cloth, so that the story of the first dawn might not be forgotten. These are not inventions of idle fancy, nor the play of wandering dreams, but the sacred inheritance of the Quiché, handed down from the first fathers, carried across generations by memory and by breath. They are the words spoken when the fire is lit, when the corn is planted, when the child is born, and when the dead are mourned. For the story is not only of what was long ago, but of what is now and what is yet to come. Here, then, is the record of the beginning, the account of the shaping of the earth and the rising of the sky. It is the voice of the elders, the voice of the keepers of tradition, set down so that the memory of the dawn shall endure, even when tongues grow silent. Though the mountains crumble, though the rivers dry, though the faces of men pass away, the word will remain. For in the beginning there was only the maker, the modeler, the bearer, the begetter, the heart of sky, and the feathered serpent. From their thoughts the world was spoken, from their will the earth was formed, and by their breath life was given. They are the root, they are the crown, they are the hidden source of all that is. This is their story and the story of those who came after, the children of earth and maize, the keepers of the word. So let it be remembered, so let it be told. Part 1. Creation of the world and humanity. Now begins the account of the shaping of the earth and the birth of the first dawn. The makers and modelers, who were the heart of sky and the feathered serpent, had spoken the word, and the world had taken form. Mountains rose and cast their shadows. Valleys opened wide to cradle rivers and streams. Springs burst forth, their waters singing through the earth. The land was clothed in grasses and trees, vines and blossoms, fruits and flowers. Every corner of the earth was filled with abundance, and the dwelling place of the future people was prepared. Then came the creatures of the forests and the meadows. Deer leapt swiftly over the hillsides. Birds filled the air with wings and song, their cries breaking the silence of the world. Jaguars prowled in the shade of the trees. Serpents slithered across the roots and stones. All manner of creatures filled the waters, the earth, and the sky. In this way the world became alive with motion, with voices, with the breath of living beings. But when the makers saw this, they spoke among themselves, saying, "It is good that the earth is clothed in green, and that the creatures stir upon it. Yet still there is no one to honor us. Still there is no one to speak our names, no one to give thanks for the dawn." And so they called to the deer and the birds, saying, "You shall speak, you shall call our names. Tell us who we are, honor us with your words." Yet the deer and the birds only cried in their own voices, sounds of the forest and the sky. Their calls were wild and without meaning, without remembrance of the makers. Then the heart of sky said, "Your voices shall remain as they are, and your dwelling shall be in the forests and in the canyons. Your flesh shall be eaten, your hides shall be used, your bones shall be broken by the children who are to come. Such shall be your place, for you cannot speak our names." Thus it was decreed for the deer, and thus it was decreed for the birds. Those who flew were assigned their nests in the trees. Those who crawled and leapt were given their homes in the thickets and the dens of the earth. The makers ordered the paths they would walk, the seeds they would eat, the water they would drink. Yet still none were found who could remember the divine word. Then the makers turned their thoughts once more to the creation of mankind. They spoke together, "Let us fashion those who will honor us, those who will keep the memory of the dawn. Let us make guardians of the earth who will walk upright, who will think and speak, who will nourish us with prayers and offerings." And so began the shaping of the first men. They took clay from the banks of the rivers and molded it with their hands. They shaped arms and legs. They gave faces and mouths. They made bodies of mud. For a moment, these clay figures stood upright, fragile, but alive. They spoke, but their words were confused and without strength. They walked, but their bodies shook and fell apart. Soon the rain fell upon them, and their forms dissolved back into the mud. Water carried them away in streams, scattering them until nothing remained but the clay from which they had been taken. The makers saw this and said, "This shall not be. They are too weak, too fragile, too soft. They cannot endure the sun, they cannot withstand the rain. They are but shadows of men, not the true ones who will remember us." So they tried again. This time they carved men from the wood of trees. They shaped their bodies with care, giving them limbs and faces. These wooden figures stood strong, their bodies firm and upright. They multiplied and spread upon the earth. They made houses, they spoke to one another, they bore children. Yet within them there was no soul, no heart, no understanding. They moved as though alive, but they did not know the makers, nor did they give thanks. They walked without purpose, and their eyes were empty. Then the makers said, "They will not do, for they have no hearts. no memory of us. They speak, yet they do not remember the word of creation. They are hollow, like the trees from which they were carved. And so judgment fell upon the wooden people. Their own dogs rose against them, crying out, "You gave us no food when we hungered, yet we served you." Their own grinding stones spoke, saying, "We were worn down by your hands, but you gave us no gratitude." Their pots and pans shouted, "We boiled and burned in the fire for you, but you showed us no respect." Then the earth itself was stirred, and a great flood came upon the wooden people. They were broken and scattered, swept away by the waters. Their faces were crushed, their bodies splintered, and they perished in the storm. It is said that from them descended the monkeys of the forests, whose hollow cries still echo the empty speech of those who had no memory. Thus, the monkeys remain as a sign, living reminders of that failed creation. But the makers did not despair, for they knew that the true people had not yet been born. The dawn had not yet come. 3 times they had tried, and 3 times their work had failed. Yet still they resolved, saying, "Let there be another attempt. Let there be beings whose hearts endure, whose words will be true, whose memory will not fade. They shall keep the story of the dawn. They shall honor us, and they shall walk upon the earth with strength." So the makers turned once more to their work. They looked to the plants of the fields, to the maize that was the heart of sustenance, the flesh of the people. From white corn and yellow corn they made the flesh of man. From water they made the blood. The maize was ground, it was kneaded, and from it were shaped the bodies of the first 4 men. Strong were their arms, broad were their chests, steady were their legs. They were men of substance, not shadows, not hollow forms, but true guardians of the earth. And these were their names: Balam Kitse, Balam Akab, Mahukuta, and Iki Balam. They were the first fathers, the first men who walked upon the new earth. Their eyes opened, and they saw far across the valleys and mountains. Their thoughts were clear, their words strong, their hearts full of understanding. They lifted their eyes to the sky and gave thanks to the makers, to the heart of sky and the feathered serpent who had given them life. The makers looked upon them with joy, for at last their work had found its completion. At last there were beings who could honor them, who could speak their names, who could remember the dawn. Yet the makers also feared, for the vision of the first fathers was too great. They saw all things, they knew all things, their sight reached to the ends of the earth. And so the makers breathed a mist over their eyes, dimming their vision, so that they would see only what was near, know only what was given. For men were not to be as gods, but as children of the earth, remembering yet limited, grateful yet humble. Thus were the first men created. From the flesh of maize and the breath of the makers they came forth, guardians of memory, keepers of the dawn. And from them the generations would follow, until the earth was filled with the children of corn, the people of the Quiche, who carried in their hearts the word of the beginning. Now the first fathers stood upon the earth, gazing at the mountains, the valleys, and the sky that arched above them. They lifted their hearts in gratitude, for they knew they had been formed by the will of the makers, the modelers, the bearers, and the begetters. Yet even as they rejoiced in their strength, they looked about them and saw that they were alone. There were 4 of them, but there were no companions for their hearts, no women with whom they might share the earth, no mothers to give birth to the generations that would follow. And so they prayed once more to the makers and said, "You have given us life. You have made us from corn and water, and you have given us the strength to walk upon the earth. But we are incomplete. We are only half of what we must be. Give us companions, that we may multiply, that our children may carry the word into the future. that the earth may not be empty. The makers heard their prayers and were moved, and so they spoke, saying, "Let there be women, companions, and mothers, who shall complete the first fathers. From them shall come the people who will inherit the earth." Then the makers shaped the first mothers, weaving their flesh from maize, giving them form and beauty, giving them strength of spirit and the gift of fertility. Their names were Ka-ha-Paluna, Choim-ha, Tsunun-ha, and Kakiksa-ha. They were joined to the first fathers, and together they became the root of the Quiché people. Thus the earth was no longer silent, for the voices of men and women rose together. They built their homes, they gathered their food, they planted the seeds of corn, and they honored the makers with prayers and offerings. The dawn was not yet upon the world, but its light was near, and the earth trembled with the promise of generations yet to come. The first fathers and mothers lived in strength, but their wisdom and vision still remained beyond the limits of ordinary men. They saw the four corners of the earth and the vault of the sky as though it were near to them. Their thoughts reached far. Their understanding was clear, and their hearts were filled with knowledge. And when the makers looked upon them, they said, "It is not good for men to see all things. It is not good for them to know all things, for they are not as we are. They are not gods, but men. Let their sight be dimmed, let their knowledge be limited, for otherwise they will not walk humbly upon the earth, nor will they remember that it was we who gave them life." So the makers breathed again upon their eyes, and a mist clouded their vision. Their sight was narrowed to the things near at hand, their knowledge confined to the measure of their lives. Yet even so, they remained strong of heart and clear of thought. And they knew to honor the makers, to call upon the heart of sky, upon Huracan, upon the feathered serpent. Now the generations began. Children were born to the first fathers and mothers, and from them descended the Quiché people, the tribes who filled the valleys and mountains. They spread across the land, building houses and planting cornfields, raising their children to remember the story of the dawn. In those early days, the first fathers longed for the rising of the sun, for though the earth was formed, the mountains raised, the valleys filled, and the people created, still the sky remained without light. There was no sun to warm the earth, no moon to soften the darkness, no stars to guide the nights. The earth awaited the coming of its day. The first fathers gathered together and prayed to the heart of sky. "Give us the sun," they said, "that it may be day. Give us the moon, that it may be night. Give us the stars, that we may measure time. For the earth is silent and dark without them." The makers heard their prayers and replied, "The dawn shall come. But first the story must unfold, and the trials of the underworld must be endured."
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
For the sun is not yet ready to walk its path across the sky, nor the moon to follow it. Their birth will be in the trials of the twins who are yet to come. So the first fathers waited in patience, teaching their children to honor the dawn, though it had not yet arrived. They told them, "We are of corn, we are of water, we are of the earth itself. Our flesh is white corn and yellow corn, our blood is water, our breath is the word of the makers. Do not forget this, for it is the truth of who we are." And they gave offerings to the mountains and the valleys, to the rivers and the lakes, for they knew that within these places dwelt the sacred powers, the spirits who guard the world. They raised their prayers at dawn, even though the sun had not yet risen, so that when the light came, it would find them ready. Thus the earth was peopled, thus the generations began, and thus the word was preserved. From Balam Kitse and Balamakab, from Mahukuta and Ikibalam, and from their wives Kahapaluna, Choimha, Tsununha, and Kakiksaha, came the children of the Kishe, the keepers of the memory, the ones who would carry the Popol Vuh in their hearts. This was the beginning of humanity, the true dawn of men and women fashioned from maize, who walked upon the earth with hearts and souls, who remembered the word of creation, and who awaited the coming of the sun. Now the children of the first fathers and mothers grew in number, filling the valleys and mountains with their voices. They built homes of wood and thatch. They shaped tools from stone, and they planted the seeds of maize, which had been given to them as the very substance of their bodies. Each season they tended the fields, watching the shoots rise, the stalks ripen, the ears swell with grain. And as they worked, they remembered the truth. We are people of corn. At night, they gathered around the hearth, feeding the fire with branches of pine and speaking the words of the dawn. They told their children, "Our life is not our own. It was given to us by the makers, who shaped us from corn and water, who breathed into us their word. To forget this is to forget ourselves. To remember this is to remain alive in spirit." Yet though the people lived and multiplied, they still awaited the sun. The sky was vast but empty, the nights were long, and the days were filled with a shadowed light. It was as though the world lived in twilight, neither full day nor full night. The first fathers lifted their eyes and prayed, "Great heart of sky, huracan, feathered serpent, grant us the sun that it may truly be day. Grant us the moon, that the night may not be without its beauty. Grant us the stars, so that time may be counted." And the makers answered in dreams, "The sun will come, but it will not come through your prayers alone. The sun must be born of sacrifice, and the trials of the underworld must first be endured. The dawn will arise through the courage of those yet to be born, who will walk the path of trials, who will pass through the houses of darkness, of cold, of fire, of jaguars, and of bats. Only then will the sun be raised into the sky." So the first fathers understood that their task was to guard the word and to prepare the generations, while the coming of the true dawn was held for another destiny. They continued to raise prayers at the mountains, the rivers, and the sacred caves, calling upon the spirits of the earth to guard their children until the time of light. The people multiplied and spread, forming the beginnings of the great lineages. Each family carried with them the memory of their first parents and the teaching that life is rooted in maize. From one valley to another, they built their dwellings, raised their children, and gave offerings of corn, of cacao, of incense, and of copal. The earth accepted these gifts, and the people were blessed with harvests that sustained them. But always their eyes turned eastward, to the horizon where the dawn should come. And always they said to one another, "The sun has not yet risen, the moon has not yet walked, the stars have not yet spoken." For they lived in a world prepared but unfinished, a creation awaiting its crown. The first fathers, wise and strong, taught their sons and daughters the sacred order of things. There is a balance, they said, between earth and sky, between water and fire, between life and death. To walk rightly is to honor this balance, to remember that we are children of corn and that our hearts belong to the makers. They taught them how to plant the maize with prayer, how to cut the stalks with reverence, how to grind the kernels with respect, and how to raise the first mouthfuls of food in gratitude. And so the people grew, rooted in their sacred sustenance. Their bodies were of maize, their thoughts were of maize, their lives revolved around its planting and its harvest. They were no longer as the wooden figures who had no memory. They were no longer as the clay that dissolved in the rain. They were men and women of substance, enduring and grateful. Yet still the earth longed for its light. The animals stirred uneasily in the twilight. The rivers whispered of the sun that had not yet risen, and the mountains kept their watch in silence. The first fathers and mothers knew that their children would one day witness the dawn, but they themselves would not bring it. For the rising of the sun was bound to another story, the story of the twins who would walk the trials of Xibalba. Until then, the first fathers remained as guardians, teaching the sacred words, reminding their children, "This is who we are. Do not forget. We are people of corn, born of the makers, shaped of maize and water, given breath by the word. The sun will come, and when it does, it shall rise upon us as its true children." Thus the earth was made ready. The people were established, and the story of the dawn was prepared for its fulfillment. Thus the first fathers and mothers lived, strong and enduring, nourished by the maize that was both their flesh and their spirit. Their children multiplied, their houses spread across the valleys, and their fields rose green with corn each season. Yet the world was still incomplete, for the sun had not yet appeared, and the true dawn was hidden in the heart of time. The earth lay beneath a sky without brilliance, a sky that gave no warmth. It was as if a veil covered creation, holding back the fullness of life. The people looked to the horizon each day, waiting for the light that did not come. They gave offerings at the mountains, at the caves, at the rivers, saying, "Let the dawn rise, let the sun walk the sky, let the world be complete." But the makers were silent, for the hour of the sun's birth was not yet. In those days, the balance of the world was still unsettled, for arrogance and false power moved across the face of the earth. There arose beings who sought to claim the glory of the dawn for themselves, who shone with a brightness not their own, who set themselves above the order of the makers. Chief among these was Vukub Kakix, the seven macaw. He was a mighty bird, adorned with jeweled eyes that glittered like emeralds and teeth that gleamed like precious stones. His wings were painted with radiant colors, and his feathers shone with the brilliance of turquoise and jade. He perched high upon the branches of the great ceiba tree, and his voice rang out across the valleys. "I am the sun," he cried. "I am the moon. None is greater than I. My brilliance lights the earth. My glory is the crown of the sky. Who can stand against me? Who can deny my greatness?" And the people trembled at his words, for in the twilight world his false brilliance seemed real. His jeweled eyes cast sparks like lightning, and his shining teeth flashed as though he were the dawn itself. The beasts of the forests bowed before him, the birds flew in his shadow, and even men looked to him with awe. But though he claimed the glory of the makers, he was not the true sun, nor was he the true moon. His brilliance was stolen, his power born of pride. The heart of sky looked upon him and said, "This shall not be, for the world is not yet ready for the dawn, and the sun has not yet risen. The false shall not rule in place of the true. Let there be those who will humble him, those who will prepare the way for the birth of the light. And so it was that the destiny of the hero twins was written, though they had not yet been born. Hunahpú and Xbalanqué, the sons of sacrifice, would rise against the arrogance of Seven Macaw. By cunning and courage, they would bring down his false glory, stripping him of the jewels and stones that made him proud, humbling him so that the true dawn could one day shine. But the story of the twins and of their trials belongs to the next telling. For now it is enough to know that the earth was made ready, the people of corn were created, and the stage was set for the struggle between false light and true. Thus ends the account of the creation of the world and the shaping of humanity, the first fathers and mothers who walked the earth, and the promise of the dawn that was yet to come. Part 2. Hero Twins and the Defeat of Vucub Caciques. Now begins the story of the Hero Twins, the sons of destiny, whose deeds shaped the path to the dawn. They were Hunahpú and Xbalanqué, born of sorrow and wonder, born of the sacrifice of their father and the courage of their grandmother. Their tale is the heart of the Popol Vuh. For through them the false was humbled, the underworld was overcome, and the sun and moon were prepared to rise. Long before their birth, there lived two brothers, Hunahpú and Vucub Hunahpú. They were skilled in the sacred ball game, strong in body and bold in heart. Each day they set up the rubber ball and played upon the court, their cries echoing across the valley. But the sound of their play rose down into Xibalba, the dark underworld where the lords of death dwelled. The lords were angered by the noise of the game. Who dares disturb our silence? Who dares fill our realm with the sound of play? They said, and so they summoned the brothers to appear before them. Hunahpú and Vucub Hunahpú obeyed, descending into Xibalba with their ball and their gear. There they faced the lords in their courts of trial, where darkness, fear, and deception ruled. The lords tested them with deadly challenges: the house of darkness, where no light shone; the house of cold, where the chill cut to the bone; the house of knives, where blades flashed and thirsted for blood. But the brothers were deceived. They were defeated. And in the end, Hunahpú was sacrificed, his head cut from his body and hung in a barren tree. The tree was once without fruit, but when his head was placed upon its branch, it blossomed with round calabash gourds, each glistening as though it were the skull of the sacrificed. The lords forbade any to approach the tree, declaring it sacred and untouchable. Yet from that tree, the miracle of life would come. For there was among the maidens of Xibalba a daughter of the lords, called Xbalanqué. She came near the tree and saw the skull of Hunahpú hanging there, gleaming among the gourds. The skull spoke to her, saying, "Stretch forth your hand."
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Do you hear that? Sounds like breakfast is ready. Because Quaker's coming in hot with morning nutrition. 100% whole grain oats and a good source of fiber to fuel the rhythm of your morning and kickstart your day. And that sounds absolutely delicious. Fuel to start whatever's next. Quaker, official sponsor of FIFA World Cup 26.
Let's go!
She obeyed, and the skull spat into her palm. At once she was filled with life, and thus she conceived. When her father, Cuchumacic, learned of her pregnancy, he was enraged. "You have shamed us," he said. "You shall die." He commanded that she be sacrificed. But the messengers of death who were sent to kill her took pity and spared her. They made it appear as though she had died, bringing back to the lords a false heart of tree sap. In secret, Xquic fled from Xibalba, carrying the children of Hunahpú within her womb. She came to the house of Xmucain, the grandmother of the sacrificed brothers, but Xmucain did not believe her. "Who are you to claim you carry the children of my son? You are a deceiver, and I will not accept you." So Xmucain tested her. She sent her to gather a netful of maize from a single stalk in the field, a task impossible for any woman. But Xquic prayed to the guardians of the corn, the spirits who watch over the fields. They caused the stalk to grow heavy with ears, and when she shook it, the kernels fell like rain into her net. She returned to Xmucan with the maize, and the old grandmother was astonished. Then she knew the truth. The children within Xquic were the children of her son. So it was that Hunahpú and Xbalanqué were born. From the beginning, they were no ordinary children. They were wise and cunning, playful yet filled with purpose. They were raised by their grandmother Xmucan, who loved them dearly, though she often despaired at their mischief. The boys grew quickly, playing in the fields, hunting with blowguns, and testing their strength against the creatures of the forest. Yet they did not forget the fate of their father and uncle, nor the arrogance of Vucubcaquix, the false sun who perched high in his jeweled glory. Their destiny was already upon them, to humble the proud bird and to avenge their father by facing the lords of Xibalba. Thus begins the tale of their first great trial, the defeat of Vucubcaquix, whose shining arrogance darkened the world. Now 7 macaw, Vucubcaquix, still perched high upon his ceiba tree, glittering with stolen light. His jeweled eyes blazed like emerald fire, and his teeth shone with the brilliance of jade and turquoise. The people looked upon him and trembled, for in the twilight world his false radiance seemed as if it were the sun itself. He strutted upon the branches, preening his feathers, declaring, "I am the light of the world. I am the sun. I am the moon. None is greater than I. Who can oppose me?" But the makers looked down upon him and said, "This arrogance must end. The world awaits the true dawn, and the false light must be humbled. Let the hero twins be the ones to bring him down." So Hunahpú and Xbalanqué prepared themselves. They were but boys, yet they carried the destiny of creation within their hearts. They took their blowguns, polished smooth and straight, and set out toward the ceiba tree where 7 macaw perched. They moved quietly through the forest, stepping with the silence of hunters, their eyes fixed upon the shining bird above. When they reached the foot of the tree, they whispered to one another. "This is the moment," said Xbalanqué. "The false sun must fall, so that the world may be prepared for the true light." Hunahpú nodded, and together they fitted darts into their blowguns. They raised them to their lips, drew breath, and loosed their shots. The darts flew swift and true. They struck 7 macaw in the jaw, shattering his shining teeth, cracking the jewels that were the source of his false glory. The great bird cried out, his voice no longer proud, but broken with pain. He fell from the tree, tumbling to the earth, flapping his wings in vain. Hunahpú rushed forward to seize him, but in his fury 7 macaw struck back. With his talons he tore at Hunahpú, wrenching his arm and twisting it until the boy fell. The twins retreated, carrying their wounded brother, while 7 macaw staggered away, clutching his broken jaw. He cried out in anger and shame, for his brilliance was fading, his teeth destroyed, his pride wounded. He fled to his house, where his wife, Ximalmat, came to him. She saw his broken jaw and his pain, and she tried to comfort him. But Seven Macaw groaned, saying, "The boys struck me down, they shattered my teeth, they dimmed my brilliance. I was the sun, I was the moon, but now I am nothing." The hero twins did not abandon their task. They knew that the bird still lived, and that his pride had not yet been broken, so they devised a plan of cunning. They sought the aid of two wise ones, an ancient couple skilled in craft and knowledge, the great white grandfather and the great white grandmother. These elders were healers, makers of medicine, carvers of teeth, setters of bones. The twins said to them, "Go to the house of Seven Macaw. Tell him you are healers. Tell him you can cure his pain, that you can mend his jaw and restore his sight. But instead, remove from him the jewels and the stones that give him his false brilliance. Take away his teeth of turquoise, pluck from his eyes the shining emeralds, so that he will no longer claim to be the sun and the moon." The old couple agreed. They came to the house of Seven Macaw, walking slowly, leaning on their staffs. They looked humble and poor, their hair white, their steps weary. When they entered, they saw the great bird lying in pain, groaning and clutching his broken jaw. "Who are you?" asked Seven Macaw. "We are but poor healers," said the old man. "We set bones, we cure sickness, we mend teeth and eyes. We are not mighty, but our work is useful." "Then heal me," cried Seven Macaw. "Restore my teeth, for they are shattered. Restore my eyes, for they are dim. Make me again as I was, shining with brilliance." The elders nodded. They approached him gently and said, "We will heal you. But first we must remove what is damaged, for it is no longer of use." So they took from him the jewels of his teeth, the shining turquoise and jade, and replaced them with white kernels of maize. They plucked from his eyes the emeralds that glittered, and his sight faded. His brilliance was gone, his glory dimmed, his strength departed. Seven Macaw groaned, weakened and humbled. "I am no longer the sun," he said. "I am no longer the moon. My power is gone, my pride destroyed." And with that the false light passed away, and his reign was ended. The hero twins rejoiced, for the arrogance of Seven Macaw had been humbled, and the path was cleared for the true dawn. The world no longer bowed to false brilliance, but awaited the rising of the sun and moon that would come in their proper time. Thus was the first great deed of Hunahpú and Xbalanqué accomplished, and the glory of Vucub was broken. Though Seven Macaw had been humbled, his false brilliance stripped away by the cunning of the hero twins, his line was not yet extinguished. For he had two sons, Zipacna and Cabracan, who, like their father, were swollen with arrogance and strength. They, too, claimed the glory of the world for themselves, boasting of powers that belonged not to men, nor even to the dawn, but to the Makers alone. The first was Zipacna, a mighty being whose strength shook the mountains. He boasted that he alone had raised the earth, that the peaks and ridges were his handiwork, that no stone was too great for him to lift. He strode across the valleys, uprooting trees and casting them aside, priding himself on his might. The second was Cabracan, who claimed dominion over the earth itself. He boasted that with a kick of his heel he could topple mountains, that he could cause the ground to tremble, that he alone commanded the quaking of the earth. Together they were terrors to the people, swelling in pride and leaving destruction in their path. The Makers looked upon them and said, "The sons of Seven Macaw are like their father. Their pride must be broken, their arrogance cast down, lest they rule the world in falsehood. Let the hero twins bring their downfall, as they brought down Vucub. So Hunahpú and Xbalanqué set their minds to the task. They watched Zipacna, and they saw that he loved to boast of his strength. He carried stones upon his shoulders. He dragged logs. He mocked the people by doing what no man could do. The twins said among themselves, "Let us trick him by his own pride. Let him be undone by the boast of his strength." They found a group of 400 boys who were felling trees to build a house. The boys struggled to drag the heavy logs, and Zipacna came upon them. He laughed and said, "You are weak. Let me show you the strength of my arms." He lifted the great trunks with ease and bore them to the site. The boys marveled, but in their hearts they despised him, for his arrogance was without end. The 400 boys made a plan. They dug a deep pit, and within it they laid logs to form a foundation. They said to Zipacna, "Help us set this great beam, for it is too heavy for us." And when he bent to lift it, they pushed it down upon him, trapping him within the pit. Then they heaped earth and stones over him, burying him alive. They rejoiced, saying, "Now his boasting will trouble us no more." But Zipacna did not die. He lay hidden beneath the earth, silent as stone, waiting. When night fell, and the 400 boys celebrated their triumph with drink and song, he rose up from the pit. With his strength he overturned the house they had built, crushing them beneath it. Thus the 400 boys perished, and they were transformed into the stars of the sky, a cluster that shines even now as a reminder of their fate. The hero twins, hearing of this, said, "It is not enough to let him boast. We must bring his end by cunning." They set a trap for Zipacna, luring him to a mountain with the promise of food. They placed a great crab at the mouth of a cave, and when Zipacna saw it, he said, "At last I will feast, for I am hungry." He entered the cave to seize it, but the mountain collapsed upon him, and he was crushed at last beneath its weight. So ended the arrogance of Zipacna, the first son of 7 Macaw. Now there remained Kabra Khan, the earthquake bringer. His pride was greater still, for he declared, "I will topple the very mountains. None can withstand my strength, for I shake the earth with a single kick of my heel." He strode across the valleys, striking the ground and causing the hills to tremble. The people feared him, for he mocked their houses and fields, casting down what they built and shattering what they sowed. The hero twins said, "Let us end him as well, for his pride is too great." They sought him out, carrying with them a bird they had hunted. When they met him, they said, "Brother, we are hunters. Will you not eat with us? For we have killed this great bird, and its flesh is sweet." Kabra Khan laughed, saying, "I will eat, for I hunger. But I will not hunt with you, for no mountain can stand before me." So the twins roasted the bird, but before giving it to Kabra Khan, they rubbed its flesh with earth, so that it was poisoned. They offered it to him, and he ate greedily. At once his strength failed, his limbs grew heavy, his head spun with weakness. He staggered, unable to stand. Then the twins bound him hand and foot, and they cast him down into the earth, burying him where his pride could no longer shake the mountains. Thus was Kabra Khan defeated, and the last of the sons of 7 Macaw was undone. The world was freed from their arrogance, and the false powers were humbled. The people no longer trembled before their boasting, for their reign was ended. And the makers looked upon the hero twins and said, "It is good. You have cleared the path for what is to come. You have prepared the way for the trials of Xibalba and for the birth of the sun and the moon." Thus, Hunahpú and Xbalanqué triumphed in their second great deed, bringing down the sons of 7 Macaw, as they had humbled their father. But greater trials awaited them still, for the lords of Xibalba had not forgotten the blood of Hunahpú, nor forgiven the defeat of their pride. Thus the arrogance of Seven Macaw and his sons was broken. No longer did false brilliance rule the sky. No longer did empty boasting shake the earth. The jeweled eyes of Vukub Kakix were dim. The might of Zipakna was crushed beneath the mountain, and the fury of Kabrakan lay buried in the ground. The false dawn was ended, and the world was left to await the true sun and moon. The hero twins, Hunahpú and Xbalanqué, returned to their grandmother, Xmucain, who received them with tears of joy. "You have avenged your father and uncle," she said. "You have humbled the proud ones who claimed the sky and earth as their own. But greater trials remain, for your father's blood still cries out from Xibalba. You must walk the path he walked, face the lords who destroyed him, and triumph where he fell." The twins bowed their heads, for they knew this was their destiny. The downfall of Vukub Kakix was but the beginning. The greater battle lay ahead in the halls of the underworld where the lords of death waited with traps and trials. Yet, the victory over the false bird and his sons had given them strength, and the world itself rejoiced at their deeds. The mountains stood firm, no longer mocked by the boasts of Kabrakan. The valleys lay at peace, no longer trodden down by Zipakna's pride. The sky was cleared of false light, no longer dazzled by the stolen brilliance of Seven Macaw. The people of the earth lifted their faces with hope, saying, "The true dawn will come, for the twins have prepared the way." But Hunahpú bore upon him the wound of his battle with Seven Macaw. His arm had been torn and broken, and though the pain had lessened, he still carried the scar. It was a reminder of the cost of their struggle, and of the courage needed for what was to come. Xbalanqué tended his brother, binding his arm, and together they learned that their victories would not come without suffering, nor their triumphs without sacrifice. In those days the twins wandered the forests and the fields, hunting with their blowguns, playing upon the ball court, and learning the ways of the world. They practiced their cunning, setting traps for birds and beasts. And through these small contests, they sharpened their wits for the greater trials. They laughed and played, but always they remembered their father Hunahpú, whose skull still hung upon the calabash tree in Xibalba, and whose fate they were sworn to avenge. For the lords of Xibalba had not forgotten the twins either. They heard the noise of their play upon the earth, just as once they had heard the noise of Hunahpú and Vukub Hunahpú. Their anger stirred again, and they said, "These boys trouble us with their noise. Let us summon them to our courts, as we summoned their father and uncle. This time we will test them, we will trick them, and we will destroy them." But the twins were not as their father had been. They were cunning, and they knew the deceits of the lords. They were not easily led nor easily broken. The makers themselves watched over them, guiding their steps. For the fate of the world depended on their triumph. Thus, the tale of Seven Macaw and his sons came to its end, and the tale of Xibalba began. The hero twins had broken the false lights of the earth, and now they prepared to descend into the darkness below, where the true dawn would be forged. Part 3. Journey to Xibalba. Now begins the tale of the descent into Xibalba, the underworld, where the lords of death sit in council and where the fate of men is tested. It was to this place that Hunahpú and Xbalanqué were called, just as their father and uncle had been summoned before them. But the twins were not like those who came before. They carried cunning in their hearts, and they walked with the strength of destiny. The lords of Xibalba had heard the sound of their ball game rising from the earth above. The bouncing of the rubber ball, the cries of the players, the laughter of the boys echoed through the caverns of the underworld. Their pride was stung, for it was the same noise that once drew Hunahpú and Vukub Hunahpú to their doom. They said among themselves, "Again we hear this insolence. Again, the sound of play reaches our ears. Who dares disturb the silence of death? So they sent their messengers, owls of the night with eyes like coals and wings that beat silently. The owls flew up through the caverns, through the roots of the ceiba tree, up to the ball court where Hunahpú and Xbalanqué played. Landing before them, they spoke in harsh voices. The lords of Xibalba summon you. You are to appear before them. You will descend into the underworld to walk the trials they set before you. Refuse, and you shall be destroyed. The twins listened without fear. They looked at one another and smiled. So it begins, said Xbalanqué. The lords who destroyed our father call for us. Let us go, for this is the path we were born to walk. Hunahpú nodded, gripping his blowgun. We will not go as victims, he said. We will go as hunters. Thus, they set out on the road to Xibalba, accompanied by the owl messengers. The path was long and filled with dangers. They came first to a great river, swollen with rushing scorpions, their tails arched to strike. But the twins crossed unharmed, stepping lightly upon the stones, while the scorpions hissed and struck at the air. Beyond the river of scorpions lay another river, this one filled with blood. Its waters ran red and thick, its stench heavy in the air. Yet the twins crossed it without faltering, walking as though upon firm ground, their eyes fixed on the road ahead. Then came the third river, filled with pus and filth, a place of corruption and decay. But the twins passed through it as though it were clear water, untouched by its foulness. For they carried within them the protection of the Makers and the destiny of the dawn. At last they came to the edge of Xibalba itself. Before them stretched the great crossroads where 4 paths met. Each path spoke with a voice of its own. One was black, one was white, one was red, and one was yellow. The paths cried out, calling to the twins, "This way! Come this way!" But these were the voices of the lords of Xibalba, seeking to confuse and mislead them. The twins listened in silence. Then Xbalanqué said, "Let us send the owls ahead. Let them walk these paths, and let us see which one is true." The owls obeyed, and the twins followed carefully, avoiding the deceptions of the crossroads. In this way they escaped the first of the tricks of the underworld. They came at last to the court of the lords of Xibalba, a great hall filled with shadows. Upon thrones of stone sat the rulers of death, grim and silent. Among them were 1 death and 7 death, the first among the lords, and beside them sat their companions, the masters of sickness, of suffering, of blood, of bones, and of pestilence. They were many, each with a name of terror, each with a face of cruelty. The lords looked upon the twins and said, "Welcome. Sit here upon our bench." They pointed to a seat carved of stone, but the bench was no seat. It was a blazing fire disguised by magic. When Hunahpú and Vucub Hunahpú had come before, they sat upon it and were burned, humiliated before the court. But the twins were not deceived. They saw the fire beneath the illusion and refused to sit. The lords scowled, for their trick had failed. Then they said, "We will greet you, but first you must greet us. Here we are, all of us who rule Xibalba. Speak our names if you know them," and they pointed to rows of figures seated in the hall. Some were real lords, but others were merely wooden statues dressed in finery, meant to confuse. Hunahpú and Vucub Hunahpú had greeted the false lords and were mocked. But the twins looked closely, and they greeted only those who were living, ignoring the figures of wood. Again the lords frowned, for the boys had seen through their deception. Yet they said, "You are welcome among us. Now take the torch and the cigars we give you. Keep them burning until morning, and return them whole. This, too, was a trick, for Hunahpú and Hunahpú had once been tested thus, and they failed. They burned the torch and cigars through the night, and in the morning they were shamed. But the twins were wiser. They placed fireflies upon the cigars, and they set red feathers upon the torch so that they glowed as if burning. And so when morning came, they returned the torch and cigars untouched, still whole. And the lords of Xibalba were astonished. For the first time, the lords knew that these boys were no ordinary victims. Their tricks had failed. Their deceptions were broken. Hunahpú and Xbalanqué stood before them unscathed, and the underworld stirred uneasily, for the destiny of the twins was beginning to unfold. The lords of Xibalba were troubled, for the hero twins had not fallen into their traps. They had not been burned by the hidden bench, nor deceived by the wooden effigies, nor shamed by the torch and cigars. Instead, they had answered every test with cunning and clarity. The lords whispered among themselves, "These boys are not like the others. They see through our illusions, and they mock our tricks. Let us send them into the houses of trial, where none have ever escaped alive." So they led Hunahpú and Xbalanqué to the first of the houses, the house of darkness. Within its walls there was no light, no spark, no glimmer of flame. It was a place where sight was swallowed, where even the memory of light was lost. The lords gave the twins a torch and cigars, saying again, "Keep them burning through the night and return them whole at dawn." But the twins did not fear. They knew the secret of fireflies and red feathers. They placed the fireflies upon the cigars, and their glow shone softly through the darkness. They placed the feathers upon the torch, and they gleamed as though aflame. Thus the night passed, and when the lords returned in the morning, they found the torch and cigars untouched. The twins walked from the house of darkness unharmed, and the lords ground their teeth in anger. Next, the twins were sent to the house of knives. Here the air rang with the hiss of blades, sharp obsidian knives that spun and struck as though alive. Their edges gleamed with hunger, and they clashed together, eager for blood. The twins entered without fear. They spoke to the knives as to living beings, saying, "Be still. Rest now, for we are not your enemies. Spare us, and we will honor you with offerings." The knives obeyed their words, growing silent, ceasing their clash. And so the twins passed through the house of knives unscathed. The lords were enraged. "Then let them be tested in the house of cold," they said. This was a place of frost and hail, where the winds cut like blades and the breath of men froze in their lungs. Icicles hung like daggers, and the stones of the floor were coated with ice. Many who entered never emerged, for their hearts turned to stone from the cold. But the twins were clever. They carried with them pine torches, which they lit to warm themselves. They prayed to the guardians of fire, and the flames leapt high, driving back the frost. The cold could not consume them, and when morning came, they walked forth alive. The lords of Xibalba spat with fury. "Then let them face the house of jaguars," they said. And so the twins were thrust into a chamber filled with the great cats. Their eyes glowed in the dark, their teeth gleamed, and their growls shook the air. The jaguars leapt forward, eager to tear flesh, to drink blood. But the twins spoke swiftly. "Do not harm us! Take instead what we give you!" And they cast down bones before the jaguars, who seized them eagerly. They gnawed the bones until the chamber rang with the sound of breaking. But the twins were left unharmed. Yet the lords were not done. "Let them go to the house of fire," they said. This chamber was a furnace, filled with roaring flames that leapt and twisted. The heat was unbearable, and the walls themselves glowed red with burning. None had ever survived a night within. But Hunahpú and Xbalanqué entered without fear. They called upon the spirits of flame, and they walked in the fire as though upon the earth. The flames did not consume them, for they were protected by the will of the makers. When morning came, they emerged without a burn, and the lords gnashed their teeth in despair. Still the trials were not ended. "Let them be sent to the house of bats," the lord said. This chamber was filled with shrieking bats, their wings like thunder, their teeth sharp, their cries piercing. At the center stood Camazotz, the death bat, whose face was like a blade, whose mouth thirsted for blood. The twins lay down within their blowguns, hiding through the night. The bats swarmed above, their wings brushing against the blowguns, their cries echoing in the chamber. Hunahpú grew restless, and he lifted his head to see if dawn had come. At that moment Camazotz swooped down. With a single strike, the death bat cut off Hunahpú's head, and his body fell limp within the blowgun. The bats screamed with triumph, carrying the severed head of Hunahpú to the lords of Xibalba. The lords rejoiced, believing the twins had at last been defeated. They took the head and placed it upon the ball court, saying, "Tomorrow we shall play, and the head of Hunahpú shall be our ball." But Xbalanqué was not broken. He remained hidden, his mind racing with cunning. He called upon the animals of the forest, and they brought him gourds, round and firm. He carved one into the shape of a head, painting it so that it gleamed like flesh. Placing it upon Hunahpú's body, he restored him to life, though his true head was in the hands of the lords. The twins prepared their trick. They would go to the ball court, they would play the game, and they would reclaim what was lost. The lords of Xibalba were triumphant, believing they had destroyed Hunahpú. They hung his severed head upon the ball court, boasting to one another, "Tomorrow we shall play, and their defeat will be complete. The head of the boy shall serve as our ball, and his brother shall be broken in sorrow." Their halls rang with laughter, and the shadows deepened with their pride. But Xbalanqué was not undone. He had restored Hunahpú's body with the gourd he had fashioned, and his brother lived, though his true head was captive. The twins whispered together in the darkness. "Tomorrow we shall play," Xbalanqué said, "but it will not be as the lords expect. We will trick them with their own arrogance, and we will reclaim what is ours." Hunahpú, though humbled by his loss, trusted his brother's cunning. Together they prepared their plan. When dawn came, the lords assembled at the ball court. The head of Hunahpú hung gleaming in the place of the ball, its eyes dim, its face still. The lords jeered as the twins entered. "Come now, sons of Hunahpú," they cried. "Let us see if you can play as your fathers did. But remember, the ball is no longer yours. It is your brother's head, and you shall be shamed before all of Xibalba." The game began. The lords struck the head with their hips, sending it rolling across the court. They laughed with every bounce, their cries mocking. But the twins did not falter. They played with skill, returning the head with grace, their movements swift and sure. Yet Xbalanqué watched carefully, waiting for the moment of trickery. At last, the lords prepared a great stroke, sending the head high through the air. As it soared, Xbalanqué whistled sharply, and the animals of the forest who had aided him leapt into action. From the trees they shook down a swarm of birds, and the head of Hunahpú was snatched away into the branches. In its place, the gourd that Xbalanqué had fashioned fell upon the court, bouncing with a hollow sound. The lords gasped, not knowing what had happened. They struck the gourd, thinking it still the head, but it burst open, scattering seeds across the stones. The court rang with the laughter of the twins, and the lords were shamed. In that moment, the true head of Hunahpú was restored. It was brought back from where it had been hidden, placed once more upon his body, and his life was made whole again. The lords raged with fury, for their trick had failed. They had meant to humiliate the twins, but instead they themselves were mocked. Still, they would not relent. "The game is not finished," they said. "Tomorrow we'll play again, and then we shall see your end." The twins agreed, though they smiled in secret, for they had already planted the seeds of victory. They knew that the lords could not win, for arrogance always leads to downfall. The ball court, once a place of humiliation for their father, was now a place of triumph for the sons. That night the lords plotted. "Let us destroy them with sacrifice," they whispered. "Let us burn them, grind their bones, scatter their ashes. So shall the line of Hunahpú be ended forever." And they prepared their trap, thinking themselves cunning. But Hunahpú and Xbalanqué foresaw what was to come. They said to one another, "The lords seek to destroy us, but let us accept what they plan. Let us go willingly to the fire, for death is not the end. From death we shall rise, stronger than before, and their power will be broken." So they came once more to the ball court, and they played with the lords of Xibalba. The game raged fiercely, the ball bouncing high, the cries echoing through the dark halls. At last, the lords seized their moment. They called upon their servants, who seized the twins, bound them, and cast them into the fire. The flames roared, the smoke rose, and the lords shouted with joy, believing their victory complete. The bodies of the twins were consumed, their bones ground to powder, their ashes scattered in the river. "Now it is finished," said the lords. "The sons of Hunahpú are no more. None can oppose us now." But the river carried the ashes gently, and from them life stirred again. Fish swallowed the ashes, and the twins were reborn within them, rising anew with bodies of greater power, clothed in the guise of wandering dancers. They returned to Xibalba, not as boys, but as masters of magic, their deaths transformed into the seed of their triumph. The lords of Xibalba rejoiced in their halls, certain that their power had triumphed at last. The hero twins had been bound, cast into the fire, reduced to ashes, and scattered in the river. They laughed and feasted, saying, "Now the line of Hunahpú is ended. The noise of the ball game will trouble us no more. The pride of the earth has been broken, and we are the lords of all." But the river carried the ashes gently, and the waters whispered with secrets. Fish came and swallowed the dust of the twins, and life stirred again within them. From the river's depths rose two youths, shining with new strength, clothed not as hunters, but as wandering dancers. They were Hunahpú and Xbalanqué reborn, transformed through death into masters of magic and wonder. They came to the villages along the river, dancing and playing music, and the people marveled. Wherever they performed, they astonished those who watched. They juggled with shining stones. They set fires that consumed nothing. They killed one another and brought themselves back to life. Their dances were filled with beauty, their songs with power, and their fame spread quickly through the land. Word reached the ears of the lords of Xibalba. "There are dancers who perform wonders," the people whispered. "They make mountains rise and fall. They slay one another and return to life. None have seen their like before." The lords were curious. They summoned the dancers, not knowing that they were the very twins they had thought destroyed. Hunahpú and Xbalanqué entered the halls of Xibalba in disguise, their faces shadowed, their voices humble. The lords laughed at them, saying, "Show us your tricks, little wanderers. Let us see if you can amuse the rulers of death." The twins bowed and began their performance. They played their flutes and drums, and the sound filled the hall with sweetness. They danced in circles, their steps light as air. Then they began their wonders. Hunahpú seized Xbalanqué and cast him upon the fire, burning him to ash. The lords gasped in awe. But then Hunahpú called, and Xbalanqué rose from the ashes whole again, laughing as if nothing had been done. The lords clapped their hands in delight. "Do it again! Show us more!" they cried. So the twins took the heart of a dog, threw it upon the ground, and brought it back to life, wagging its tail joyfully. They killed themselves and returned again, whole and alive. They cut open their bodies and pulled forth their hearts, only to place them back unharmed. Each wonder was greater than the last, and the lords of Xibalba were spellbound. At last they said, "Kill us as you kill one another, and bring us back to life. Show us that your power is true." The twins bowed low. "As you wish, lords," they said. They seized one Death and cast him into the fire. His body burned, his ashes fell to the ground. The lords waited for his return, but he did not rise. Then they seized 7 Death and did the same. He, too, was consumed, and his ashes remained still. The hall fell silent. The lords of Xibalba realized too late that they had been deceived. Hunahpú and Xbalanqué cast aside their disguises, revealing themselves in their true glory. "We are the sons of Hunahpú," they declared. "You slew our father and our uncle, but you could not destroy us. Your power is ended. Your reign is broken. No longer shall you rule with pride. No longer shall men tremble before your lies. Your day is finished." And the remaining lords cowered before them, their strength withering. They bowed their heads, accepting their defeat. The twins declared, "From this day forth you shall no longer rule with pride. Death shall remain, for it belongs to the world. But you shall not boast of power. You shall be feared only as shadows, not as rulers. Your names shall fade, and men shall remember not your strength, but your defeat." Thus the lords of Xibalba were cast down. Their courts grew silent. Their halls were emptied of pride, and their dominion was diminished. The hero twins triumphed, not by strength alone, but by wisdom, cunning, and sacrifice. And then Hunahpú and Xbalanqué rose to the sky. One became the sun, blazing with the light of day. The other became the moon, softer, cooler, a companion in the night. The world was at last complete. The dawn rose, the stars gave way, and the earth rejoiced in the coming of its true light. The people lifted their faces to the sky, seeing the sun and moon for the first time. They gave thanks to the makers, to the heart of sky, to the feathered serpent for the gift of light. And they remembered the twins, Hunahpú and Xbalanqué, who had endured trials, who had faced death, and who had risen in triumph. Thus the journey to Xibalba ended, and the true dawn of the world began. Now the story turns from the trials of the twins and the birth of the sun and moon to the lineages of the Quiché, the people who kept this sacred book in their hearts. For just as the dawn completed the creation of the world, so the children of the first fathers became the roots of nations, and from them grew the dynasties who ruled in Utatlan and beyond. The first 4 men and 4 women, fashioned of maize, were the parents of the Quiché people. Their names were preserved with reverence: Balam Kitse, Balam Akab, Mahukuta, and Iki Balam, with their wives Kaha Paluna, Choimha, Tsuununha, and Kakiksaha. From these couples came the families that filled the valleys and spread across the mountains. They were the mothers and fathers, the grandmothers and grandfathers, the pillars of the Quiché. In those early days, the people multiplied quickly. They built villages, they raised temples of stone and thatch, and they offered prayers to the heart of sky, to Huracan, to Guchumats, and to the gods of maize and mountain. Their lives were ordered by the seasons of planting and harvest, and their songs carried the memory of the dawn. The first fathers longed for the presence of the gods, for though they had sight and wisdom, their vision had been dimmed by the makers, so that they saw only what was near. Still, they desired to behold the face of the sun, and so they set out with their wives, climbing mountains and crossing rivers, seeking the place where the sky touched the earth. They prayed, fasting and sacrificing, asking to see the face of their makers. At last, their prayers were answered. On the mountain, Hakavits, the gods revealed themselves in signs and voices, not in human form, but in the trembling of the earth, in the flashing of lightning, in the whisper of wind. The first fathers bowed their heads and offered incense and sacrifice, for they knew they had been granted favor. From that time, the mountain Hakavits became sacred, a place of offerings for the generations to come. There the first fathers taught their children the rites of prayer, the burning of Popol, the fasting of the body, the chanting of the sacred words. From there the lineages were ordered, and the tribes began to separate, each with its own name and path. The children of Balam-Kitze, Balam-Akab, Mahukuta, and Iqui-Balam grew into mighty families. Some became rulers, others priests, others warriors. They spread into the valleys of Chavila, Zaalama, and Tsununem. The people were many, and their villages dotted the land, each with its hearth, each with its ball court, each with its maize fields. But always they remembered the mountain Hakavits, for it was there the gods had spoken to their fathers. From this sacred place the dynasties of the Quiché drew their authority, for their rulers were not merely chiefs, but guardians of the sacred covenant, keepers of the memory of the dawn. In time, the people gathered in greater strength. Villages joined into towns, towns into cities. They raised Utatlan, the great city that shone with temples, palaces, and markets. There the lords of the Quiché sat upon their thrones, adorned with jade and quetzal feathers, bearing staffs of rulership carved with glyphs of maize and sky. They claimed descent from the first fathers, and their authority was bound to the story of creation. For the Popol Vuh was not only the memory of the gods, but also the charter of kings. To rule was to be the heir of Balam-Kitze and his brothers, to carry the word of the makers, to keep the balance of the earth. Thus, myth became history, and the sacred story became the foundation of power. The genealogies were recited with care, linking each ruler to the first fathers, naming the generations in order so that none would be forgotten. The line stretched unbroken from the dawn of Mazemen to the thrones of Utatlan. Each name was a thread in the woven cloth, each ruler a link in the chain of memory. And so the story of the gods and the story of the people were joined, for the deeds of Hunahpú and Xbalanqué prepared the dawn, but the lives of their descendants filled the earth with nations and kings. The genealogies were not mere lists of names, nor dry recitations of ancestry. They were living cords of power, binding the present to the sacred dawn. For in the Quiché world, to rule was not only to command warriors and govern villages, it was to stand as the living vessel of the first fathers, to embody their covenant with the gods. Authority came not from conquest alone, but from the weaving of blood and myth into a single thread. The lords of Utatlan declared themselves heirs of Balam-Kitze, Balam-Akab, Mahukuta, and Iqui-Balam. When they spoke as sons of the dawn, as guardians of the covenant sealed on Hakavits. The memory of that mountain was ever present, invoked in rituals of fire and incense, called upon when new rulers took their staffs of office. "We are not merely men," the kings proclaimed. "We are the chosen, set apart since the first rising of the sun." This claim of descent was a shield and a weapon. It bound the people together, uniting villages and clans under a single story. It gave the rulers authority over rivals, for who could contest the line that stretched unbroken from the makers themselves? And yet, like all power, it was contested, for other nations also had their fathers, their mountains, their dawns. The Kakchikel, the Tsutuhil, and the Rabanal, each wove their own genealogies. Each claimed a thread of the sacred past. In this contest of stories, the Popol Vuh stood as the great charter of the Quiché. In Utatlan, the kingship was not merely political, but ritual. The ruler was seated upon the mat and throne with prayers and offerings, his staff carved with glyphs, his headdress heavy with jade and quetzal plumes. He was bathed, anointed, clothed in garments of maize yellow and sky blue, colors of the covenant. Around him the priests recited the words of the Popol Vuh, reminding him and all present of the bond to the makers. To forget this bond was to risk the collapse of rule, for legitimacy did not come from force alone, but from alignment with the story of creation. The genealogies also served to bridge myth and memory. They wove the supernatural deeds of the hero twins and the first fathers into the lived experiences of later rulers. Just as Hunahpú and Xbalanqué had overcome death and risen as sun and moon, so too did Quiché rulers claim to overcome chaos and bring order to the earth. Their ball courts echoed the cosmic game. Their wars were framed as renewals of balance. In every triumph, they reenacted the story of the gods, reminding their people that power was not invented, but inherited from the dawn. Thus, the Popol Vuh was a mirror of the throne. It reminded the lords of their duties, even as it exalted their rights. For the covenant was double-edged. To rule was to protect, to nurture the maize, to honor the gods with sacrifice, to guard the people from ruin. If the rulers forgot, if they ruled with cruelty or greed, the memory of the Popol Vuh could be turned against them. A reminder that even the proudest had been cast down, as Vukub Kakix had fallen, as the lords of Xibalba had been humbled. The people heard these genealogies in festival and ceremony. They were not distant tales, but the living breath of identity. When children were born, their names were placed within the weave of ancestry. When young men took their first steps into the ball court, they were reminded that they walked the same path as the sons of Hunahpú. When rulers were enthroned, the genealogies were recited like sacred smoke, binding the present to the sacred dawn. Thus, the Popol Vuh served both heaven and earth. Heaven in its account of creation and divine struggle, earth in its justification of kingship and lineage. Myth became charter, and story became sovereignty. Part 4. Genealogies and Dynastic History. In the fullness of time, the families of the Quiché gathered their strength, and their rulers raised Utatlan, the great city that would stand as the heart of their dominion. Nestled among mountains and valleys, it was a city of stone and smoke, of temples and palaces, of markets that teemed with the riches of the highlands and lowlands alike. To walk its streets was to see the order of the world made visible, for its walls and plazas were built not merely with hands, but with the memory of myth. For Utatlan was not only a seat of power, it was a sacred echo of Hakavits, the mountain where the first fathers prayed. The city stood as a new axis of the cosmos, where earth met sky and men met gods. Its temples rose like mountains, each stairway a path of ascent, each altar a place where breath and blood were given to the heart of sky. The lords of Utatlan declared themselves not just kings, but guardians of this sacred center, inheritors of the covenant that began when the first fathers were fashioned from maize. The genealogies proclaimed their right to rule. "We are the sons of Balam Kitse," the Lord said. "We carry the staff of Balam Akab. We wear the mantle of Mahukuta. We guard the words of Ikibalam. From them we descend, and by them we reign. These words were repeated in ceremony, carved upon the memory of the people. The city itself became a living monument to the Popol Vuh, its stones inscribed with the authority of the dawn. In Utatlan, every ritual was a renewal of myth. The ball court stood as a mirror of Xibalba, where the hero twins once played and triumphed. Each game was a reminder of their struggle, a reenactment of their victory. The temples rose in 4 directions, echoing the crossroads of the underworld, where the twins had chosen wisely and escaped deception. The plazas were aligned with the path of the sun and moon, recalling the twins' final transformation into light. The lords who ruled from Utatlan carried this symbolism upon their persons. Their headdresses blazed with quetzal plumes, green as the maize fields and bright as the sun. Their necklaces of jade glowed with the color of water and sky. Their staffs of rulership were carved with glyphs that spoke of the covenant sealed on Hakavits. To see them enthroned was to behold the living memory of the Popol Vuh. But the genealogies were not only inward-looking, they were also weapons in the contest of nations. When the Quiché confronted the Kaqchikel or the Tsutuhil, they declared, "Our fathers were first. Our covenant is oldest." Our line stretches unbroken to the dawn. This was not mere boasting. It was a claim to precedence, to sacred primacy. Wars were not fought only with spears and obsidian, but with stories. The victor was not only the stronger, but the one whose lineage claimed deeper roots. Thus, the dynastic history of the Quiché was more than memory. It was power, sharpened into a blade. Each ruler stood upon the shoulders of the first fathers, claiming not only to govern men, but to sustain the balance of the cosmos. For if the genealogies were broken, if the covenant was forgotten, then the city itself would crumble, its temples fall, its maze wither. Rule was therefore a sacred trust, guarded through ritual, sacrifice, and remembrance. So Utatlan rose, and the genealogies gave it strength. Its plazas filled with dancers and priests, its temples smoked with incense, its courts rang with the cries of the ball game. In every gesture, in every stone, the story of the Popol Vuh lived again, binding myth to dynasty, the gods to the lords, the dawn to the present. Yet the power of Utatlan was never without challenge. Around the highland valleys, other nations grew strong, each with their own lineages, each with their own sacred memories of the dawn. The Kaqchikel to the east, the Tsutuhil by the great waters of Atitlan, the Rabinal to the north. Each claimed descent from their own first fathers, each invoked their own mountains of covenant. Between them and the Quiché there was rivalry, sometimes in war, sometimes in alliance, always in the contest of stories. For lineage was not merely private memory, it was the foundation of diplomacy and the justification of conquest. When the Quiché lords stood before their rivals, they proclaimed, "Our covenant is the eldest. Our fathers were the first to see the gods. We are the heirs of the hero twins, the guardians of Hakavits. To resist us is to resist the will of creation." With these words they sought to establish primacy, not only with arms, but with myth. But the Kaqchikel too spoke with pride. Our fathers were not lesser. We also were present at the dawn. We also were given sight of the gods. The mountains of our ancestors are no less sacred than Hakavits. If you claim the covenant, so too do we. And thus the struggle deepened, for no nation would yield its story, no lineage would surrender its place in the weave of ancestry. Battles were fought in the valleys, the sound of obsidian against wood, the cries of warriors echoing through the hills. Cities were burned, captives taken, tribute demanded. Yet always the wars were framed in the language of ancestry. Victory was proof of divine favor, defeat a sign of broken covenant. To conquer was not only to seize land, but to proclaim, "Our lineage is stronger, our gods more faithful, our memory truer." In this way, the genealogies became living weapons. Priests recited them before armies, reminding warriors that they fought not only for fields and cities, but for the honor of the first fathers. Kings invoked them in councils, declaring that alliances must bend to the order of descent. Even captives were judged not only by their deeds, but by the story of their blood. The rivalries with the Kaqchikel were especially bitter, for they shared much with the Quiché, language, customs, gods, and thus their contest was like that of brothers. The Tsutuhil guarded their waters with the same fervor, declaring their lake a mirror of the sky, their mountains equal to Hakavits. The Rabinal, fierce in war, invoked their own ancestors, refusing to yield to the claims of Utatlan. Yet through these rivalries, the power of the Popol Vuh remained unbroken for the Quiché. Their rulers continued to weave myth into politics, using the sacred book as a charter of supremacy. They proclaimed that just as the hero twins had triumphed over the lords of death, so too did the Quiché triumph over rivals. Just as the first fathers had preyed upon Hakavits, so too did the kings of Utatlan carry the covenant forward. Thus, the genealogies were not only memory, but contest, not only remembrance, but struggle. They bound the people together, even as they set them against others. They were a mirror of power, reflecting both the glory and the strife of nations. And so the story of the Popol Vuh, having told of gods and creation, of twins and dawn, came at last to the tale of men and kings, of cities and rivalries. It closed not with silence, but with the noise of the world, of rulers enthroned, of peoples in contest, of memory turned into power.